Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to counter Thomas DiLorenzo, who's a Lincoln critic. He's actually a Lincoln critic from Pennsylvania. Played baseball at Thaddeus Stevens Middle School. And he's a Lincoln critic. He thought the Civil War was unjust and unnecessary, and he thought that the war was not to end slavery, and he thought the South's secession was lawful. Now, ironically, I'm from the South, and I thought Lincoln was a really good president, but here is the deal. When Lincoln first got elected to office into the presidency, in the 1860 presidential election, in many southern states, Lincoln was kept off the ballot, and there were as many as 100,000 Southerners that were eligible to vote at the time and registered to vote that wanted to vote for Lincoln. Well, they couldn't vote for him because he was kept off the ballot in many southern states, and that's illegal to do. That's illegal and unconstitutional on the South's part, not on Lincoln's part. Well, as soon as Lincoln was elected, they fled north. They did not fear, they feared for their safety. While the South didn't arrest these pro-Lincoln people, they, during the Civil War, the ones that stayed, they had the property confiscated. And when mob violence happened against these people, the Southern governors just turned a blind eye to it. They allowed it to happen. And that happened, and there were pro-Union Southern towns that were burnt to the ground by Confederate soldiers and mobs, and the Confederate governments didn't do anything about it. They turned a blind eye to it. That happened. It most certainly happened. And then also, Lincoln jailed a lot of pro-Southern newspapers that were in the North, a lot of anti-Civil War newspapers, people that opposed the Civil War. Lincoln threw those newspaper owners and editors into jails. But after the war, they were pardoned, and Lincoln was a champion of doing away with ex post facto law, which means that they couldn't have it on their record after the Union was united again. After the South was back into the Union, it may have been illegal to criticize the Civil War then, but Lincoln wasn't going to keep them punished for that because the war was over. A tyrant doesn't do that. And Lincoln championed doing away with ex post facto law. And also, when Lincoln was elected, now his campaign was largely not to end slavery in the Southern territories, but to end the expansion of slavery. Well, many Southerners did not like that, and Northern Democrat Stephen Douglas said rely on popular sovereignty for that. Well, we do know when the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed in 1854, where popular sovereignty was going to be the determination if slavery was allowed in those territories or not. Blood happened over the issue of slavery. Anti-slavery people and pro-slavery people were killing each other. Okay, and Lincoln said the popular sovereignty would lead to bloodshed. Also, though, Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution clearly gave the authority to the federal government to decide if slavery would be allowed in the new territories or not. So in that instance, Lincoln was just following the Constitution. And Thomas DiLorenzo does not make hardly any mention of that, just like he doesn't hardly make any mention of Lincoln's name being off the ballot in several southern states in the 1860 election. And Thomas DiLorenzo does not make any mention of that, and he's okay with the southern states seceding from the United States to form their own government, but he's not okay with West Virginia seceding from Virginia and staying in the Union, which he calls illegal. And to me, that's highly double standard. Also, yes, the Union had an income tax. Abraham Lincoln started that for the war effort, but the Confederacy did too. The Union implemented a draft. The Confederacy did as well. And yes, the Union raided southern towns and went into the South, burnt down villages, sometimes killed and raped civilians. But the Confederacy, when they raided a few northern cities as well and did the exact same thing. And also Henry Wurz ran a prison camp, and he committed a lot of war crimes and atrocities on Union prisoners of war. Well, Thomas DiLorenzo does not make any mention of that either. So, and also, there was an 1864 presidential election which Abraham Lincoln did not suspend. He allowed to happen. And his former commanding general, George McClellan, became a dove and opposed to the Civil War, and he ran on the ticket as a peace Democrat. Well, George McClellan was allowed to run, and it was an 1864 presidential election that Lincoln won by a landslide. A tyrant would have suspended the election and not allowed that election. Lincoln also, with the Emancipation Proclamation, it actually did free slaves. What basically the Emancipation Proclamation did was slaves in the southern states, they could come to northern states and join the Union Army, and if they did that, they got their freedom, and several thousand slaves were freed that way. So it's a lie saying the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free one single slave. It actually freed thousands of slaves. And Abraham Lincoln knew that he could not end slavery without a 13th Amendment, and he knew he would lose the border states if he ended slavery in those border states at that time. So had he followed, and it's in the movie Lincoln, directed by Steven Spielberg, Daniel Day-Lewis stars as Abraham Lincoln, and he had some disagreements with Thaddeus Stevens. Tommy Lee Jones played Thaddeus Stevens. And Abraham Lincoln meets with Thaddeus Stevens and tells him, if you had your way, we would have lost the border states and possibly lost the war. So Abraham Lincoln wanted to end slavery throughout the U.S., but he knew he had to do it at a certain time. And DiLorenzo doesn't really make any mention of that. So anyways, hope everybody's doing well. Take care. God bless. And bye-bye. Bye-bye.